Welcome back. This is our live coverage of the State of the Nation 2025 right here outside of City Hall in Cape Town. Joining me now, I'd like to welcome the chairperson of the Public Service Commission, Professor Somadoda Fikeni. Prof, thank you so much for joining us here at our makeshift studios for the State of the Nation 2025.
Thank you very much for yet again inviting me to this, what looks like a very exciting year. And a year pregnant with many expectations and unexpected developments.
Now, you talk of exciting times. Are you looking forward to an exciting speech from the president? What are you expecting?
To me, I'm expecting the president to address what is a very complex, volatile, uncertain world, both internally and externally. The major power in the world, the US, has just gotten a new administration that has started off into being a major, unpredictable force, both internally within the US and globally and so forth. So you can't ignore that because South Africa has been invoked in that. You also have South Africa being the president of the G20, the most important economic bloc currently in the world, and hosting that. South Africa will have to speak to that. You have developments in the DRC. Then internally, there are promises that the president had made during the time when the new administration, the 7th administration, was coming into place. And besides, he has to address some of the concerns that GNU partners have been raising around certain laws that have been passed. So there are so many things that he has to speak to, and also to make sure that the society is assured that the government knows what it is doing.
Prof Fikeni, Bella Act, NHI Act, Land Expropriation Act. It seems to be dividing just two parties of the GNU. That is the ANC and the Democratic Alliance. What's your assessment on the GNU? Is this going to be a marriage that may end up for a complete breakup?
Most marriages do have challenges. The only important thing is whether partners do realize the challenges and therefore go for a marriage counselor.
Who plays that counselor, Prof Fikeni?
It's the more, pragmatic core of the different role players, because the extremists will be there in all different sides. And if they were to establish mechanism, for example, the acts that had already gone through public consultation and Parliament had approved, are they in for review? Because now you have a GNU, or if they are to be implemented, should there be an internal consultation on how communication is going to be managed? Then there are new ones which are still going to be enacted. How are those handled? And that in itself, I think, is very much important. And not only those acts, the differences in the issue of Middle East, the differences in the issue of DRC within and amongst the GNU members, all those, they have to come up with a formula so that the public can have confidence that there's some degree of coherence.
How has South Africa played this role, of course, being the most industrialized economy on the continent, with the current war that is occurring in the Democratic Republic of Congo? We've got Paul Kagame's Rwanda backing this M23 troops. We've got a diplomatic row that's between Pretoria and Rwanda, Kigali. How does, and the assessment of this, how does President Ramaphosa, as the leader of the G20, turn this around in favor of South Africa? Because you've got Rwanda that is currently really voicing its dissatisfaction at the way the union buildings has handled this.
Well, I do think that when you do have this unprecedented situation and spat in the social media between the heads of states, one of them have to make sure that they do not inflame the situation worse by retorting, but use the diplomatic channels, but still sticking to the principles. That in itself is very much important, because in different forums they still have to meet, they still have to deal with very complex issues. So it might as well be if you have a dignified way of saying, yes, there are issues that have been said, but I felt it's not wise for us to continue in the social media. You don't conduct policy, foreign policy through social media, because there are certain sensitive issues, but there should be a coherent response, which seeks to also assure the public that what was insinuated in the retort is not necessarily true.
Let's go to economics, and obviously I'm going to touch on public servants in a bit, Prof. Fikeni. South Africa has gone to Davos. It sold itself still as the country in Africa for investment. We had 24 hours of load shedding. Of course, that's been averted. For now, we hope so. Is there a conviction from South Africa to the world that we can still attract investment? And how does South Africa grow to the 3% economy it's been telling the world it can grow to, along with business? Because I was a few weeks ago at a WEF breakfast, and business is confident along with government that they can make the 3% GDP growth.
Well, there are many other rating agencies and observing agencies who have had a favorable, improved projection. And I guess this is based on a number of factors. When we say South Africa is doing bad compared to which other regions, that's the question they normally ask. There was a time when you could say there are no wars, there is certainty and so forth. People who are trading partners with the US are not so certain with the trade wars which are coming in, with a range of presidential executive orders coming in and so forth, whether US will now be sucked into its own internal political and cultural wars and become isolationist and economic nationalism settling in for some time. Therefore, they are searching for stability. If you see the uncertainty in the Middle East, where the ceasefire may hold or may not hold, where you may have further escalation or not, these used to be investment destinations of many countries. Now they look into South Africa. What do they see? An independent judiciary that even the most established countries like the US cannot say we've taken the speaker to court, we've taken the president to court. They can't. Israel, they had to say, how do we change the law? Instead of holding the prime minister accountable. So those are plus. Many European countries which normally take months or years, like Belgium took almost 2 years to agree on a coalition. In South Africa, in 14 days, this was done. So many observers look at some of these things, and they are also realizing that beneath the headlines, which are more sensational, you have the mining disaster, you have the DRC issue and so forth. There are certain reforms which are taking place. There was a time when load shedding was a daily occurrence. Recently, we finished 300 days, which means whatever strategy is being deployed, something is working. There is a time when you are beginning to see that law enforcement is beginning to get hold of its handles. The border management, you're beginning to see some yield. Many drugs flowing into the country, you're beginning to see that the crime intelligence is working. So those, because professionalization, of course, because those are not headline-grabbing things, they are incremental in their change. But the assessing and rating agencies can see some of the resilient institutions and some of the efforts.
Prof. Fikeni, you're talking of professionalization. I want to touch on public servants. Is that something that you're hoping President Ramaphosa can touch on, given that the public service of South Africa really hold a huge importance within carrying the daily work for this country to function?
There is no way, it's inconceivable that what was a priority of 6th administration and reiterated as a priority of 7th administration, building a capable, ethical, developmental state, institutional capacity. Because everybody now realizes you can have grand policies, you can have the best promises, you can even have resources. If you do not have a technically capable and professional public service, In essence, it is the engine of any government. You wish, they implement.
Sure.
And any person who is coming to invest, a person who is going to the front staff to get service, their encounter is with public service rather than with the leaders. That's why being consistent in this rebuilding of public service capacity is important. SARS is an example which is now being used by Harvard and every other great universities around the world to say that turnaround, the modernization has yielded. They are now able to collect tens of billions more just because of that. Now, if you fixed the state capacity and professionalize, you would be able to have less corruption, more service delivery, you would be able to have more investment, you'll be able to have more law enforcement, you would be able to have coordinated systems working.
Prof. Fikeni, thank you so much for joining us, making the time for us. Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
That's Professor Somadoda Fikeni, chairperson of the Public Service Commission. Do stay tuned. We'll have more for you here on the footsteps of City Hall here in Cape Town. This is the State of the Nation 2025.